After my brief introduction, we'll hear from Morshed Mannan. Then we'll hear from Trebor Scholz. You'll see it here in front of you on the screen. Trebor and Morshed are going to have a joint session after this and exchange some views, followed by Dorleta, who is coming from Mondragon, and she will speak to artificial intelligence uses there. And there will be time for discussion towards the end, as well as some time for Trebor to let us know what is up and coming in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. There we go. So the conveners of the event are Platform Co-operativism Consortium, together with the Institute for the Cooperative Digital Economy out of the New School in New York. The Platform Co-op Consortium has different branches in different parts of the world. So this is co-hosted with PCC Thailand, and we'll hear about a conference coming up in Thailand. So it's great to have them here with us co-organizing this event. And then we have the International Center for Co-op Management at St. Mary's University. That is a leading hub, global hub for co-op education and research, offering different kinds of programs from certificate up to a master's degree in cooperative business. The PCC, I'll say a bit more when I introduce Trebor, who is coming from that organization. Next slide, please. So the introduction of our speakers, it is really a pleasure to introduce Morshed Mannan, who is a lecturer in global law and digital technology at Edinburgh Law School in Edinburgh, Scotland. He is also an affiliate with the Institute at New School in New York, and his research focuses on blockchain governance and cooperative governance. You may see him involved in different places, consulting on cooperative law and AI and digital technologies and so on. So it's great to have him here. Another amazing speaker will be Dorleta Urrutia Oñate, coming to us from Bilbao, Spain, or actually Mondragon, Spain, where she works and has her degree in engineering from Mondragon, but is now doing her PhD at Deusto University in Bilbao. And she is working on researching how explainable AI can enhance transparency in worker cooperative governance. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from her as well. And then Trebor Scholz, who needs no introductions. Trebor, who is the founding director of both the Platform Cooperative Cooperativism Consortium, and I guess you coined the term Platform Cooperativism, at the New School, and as well of the Institute, director of the Institute for the Cooperative Digital Economy. The PCC, the Platform Co-ops Consortium, brings together, provides a forum really for discussions on digital transformation within the cooperative movement. It influenced policy already and legislation in numerous countries. And the Institute itself has created a fellowship program supporting emerging scholars in the digital solidarity economy. And we will hear in these 3 parts of a series, we'll hear many of those up-and-coming scholars, emerging scholars in this field. So without further ado, I will move to, give the floor to Morshed, who is our first speaker. Great to have you.
Thank you very much. I hope you're able to hear me well. Yes? Great. So I will kick things off by talking a bit about what AI is for our purposes and what the relevance of AI is for cooperatives. So as is well known, artificial intelligence is difficult to define, as there's considerable debate about what intelligence is in the first place. So a simple functional definition of AI, like you see on the slide, is a set of technical systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. Yet, as we know, AI can refer to technical objects, such as ChatGPT, technical approaches, such as machine learning, or the general discipline that uses these approaches to build technical objects. So one particular definition that we often see being used, for instance, by the OECD, is that AI is a machine-based system that, for explicit or implicit objectives, infers from the input it receives about how to generate outputs, such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. The OECD also points out that different AI systems vary in their levels of autonomy and adaptiveness after deployment. Some of them are very dependent on the human deployer, and others show different degrees of autonomy. Many AI systems rely on both machine learning and machine reasoning, which refer to two different technical approaches. So through machine learning, a machine's performance of a specific task improves with experience. So the more the machine performs a task and gets feedback on its performance, the more it is exposed to experiences and the better its performance becomes. So if you think of early examples of machine learning, they often refer to examples about machines like computers being trained to play chess and checkers, then extending to learning for the purposes of sorting email spam, to now being used for training recommender systems used by platforms like Netflix, AI chatbots being used by e-commerce platforms, and generative AI systems like ChatGPT. Machine learning has become possible because we now have massive amounts of data that are available for training purposes. Now, in contrast to machine learning, we have machine reasoning. And machine reasoning involves the algebraic manipulation of previously acquired knowledge in order to answer a new question. So this isn't the same as human reasoning, clearly. Specific knowledge in this case is represented in the system. So for instance, human experts determine what this knowledge representation is, following which that knowledge can be used to answer multiple questions, which in turn requires the system to make probabilistic inferences. So to take, for example, in a contemporary medical expert system that can be used to detect if someone has a pneumonia, the expert system would have to calculate the probability of a patient having pneumonia given a positive X-ray scan and if there's frequency in coughing. In short, such reasoning enables the drawing of conclusions about a certain set of variables if the outcome of some of those variables is known. So you can imagine how this type of knowledge is used to train industrial robots or autonomous vehicles to avoid accidents. So the choices it makes will determine whether it's able to perform a manufacturing task correctly or if an accident would take place. Generative AI systems have been integrating machine reasoning as well, particularly to render expert judgments in certain cases. AI agents also integrate machine reasoning to achieve its goal, for example, securing the best price of an asset. And it does this by constantly and autonomously weighing the probability of different options being achieved to secure its goals. So we see just through some of these examples, from robotics to autonomous vehicles to generative AI to AI agents, how both machine learning and machine reasoning are really important technical approaches for realizing the benefits of AI. Now, AI is really, something that is transforming more or less every sector of the economy, from insurance to agriculture to finance to supply chains. In the insurance industry, AI is being used for enhanced risk assessment, personalized pricing, automated claims processing, and fraud detection. In agriculture, we see AI being used for precision farming, crop health monitoring, disease prediction, and drone-based analysis of farm data. In supply chains, like retail supermarket supply chains, AI is being used to optimize logistics, automate warehouses, and manage inventory. And in the financial sector, AI is being used for fraud detection, high frequency trading, portfolio management, and automated customer service. And of course, cooperatives haven't been immune to these transformative effects. These effects can be both good and bad. So just as I've mentioned, AI systems can improve productivity, decision-making, members' access to services, and enable new forms of innovation. At the same time, these systems can be used for workplace surveillance, the sowing of disinformation, seeding errors in decision making, and creating dependencies on typically foreign corporations. And sometimes we can see a general purpose AI system opening up both positive and negative outcomes simultaneously. So, but let's consider these implications in a bit more depth. If we could turn to the next slide. So unlike many new or emerging technologies, including cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, which cooperatives can consciously choose to avoid using, the ubiquity of AI systems make them near impossible to avoid. So you think of recommender systems like the ones I mentioned for Netflix, or chatbots that you would interact with in many different websites nowadays, or generative AI systems like Google's Gemini. These have become integral features of many platforms. It makes it almost impossible to avoid these systems entirely. And in short, you are left with the type of situation where you as an individual or you as a member may not want to use AI, but AI wants to use you. Now, having said that, if we think about Albert Hirschman's landmark book on exit, voice, and loyalty, in that book, Hirschman explains that when exit becomes near impossible, when you don't have a choice to exit anymore, you have to exercise voice because it becomes all the more important as a way of being able to challenge the degeneration of a particular organization or a particular system. But as we very well know, those of you who are here, the ordinary AI user has no voice in the or choice in the design or governance of AI systems. So this is where cooperatives can have a particularly significant role, in my view. So the principle of democratic member control can give members more choice about the use of AI systems and on what terms system is designed. While still enabling the beneficial uses of AI, democratic member control allows a careful weighing of the opportunity costs and trade-offs of using AI as opposed to not using AI. One important factor to consider is the effect that investment and use of AI may have on making a cooperative competitive in a given market. So, for example, the market could be low margin consumer retail. So in retail supermarkets, where there might be advantages of using AI. But at the same time, you have to weigh this against the negative impacts AI can have on labor, for instance. So the type of pressure it could create on retail workers. Having said that, if we look at labor impacts in particular, in recent years, the hidden labor behind the development of AI systems, particularly generative AI, has begun receiving attention. So this includes the labor of artists and creatives, data annotators, content moderators, and users, among many others. So even before AI systems were being widely discussed, there were debates about whether the introduction of robots and automation would lead to destructive job losses or instead enable the creation of new jobs. It is, however, necessary to consider the impact AI can have on the workforce of cooperatives. So already AI is being widely used to speed up or automate specific tasks. So think about the taking of meeting minutes, for example, or to improve the efficiency of data collection. So think of agricultural cooperatives collecting farm data using drones. Some cooperatives, particularly in the financial sector, such as the Hudson Valley Credit Union, have begun appointing new chief AI officers to develop cooperative AI strategies while also trying to mitigate the risks that AI presents. Now, one of these particular risks that I think is worth highlighting is the mismanagement of personal data. Just as data protection and privacy considerations have led to cooperative members being trained about how sensitive personal data should be handled, for example, complying with the European Union's GDPR, the widespread use of AI necessitates member upskilling as well. So this is also in line with the cooperative principle concerning cooperative education. Such education can range from internal courses on how to safely and properly use specific AI systems to workshops on how AI could improve work processes and governance within the cooperative. Now, speaking of cooperative governance, AI systems, as you know, may be used in a variety of ways to support cooperative governance. So that can be from assisting in tallying votes and taking minutes, to summarizing complex topics of discussion, to even executing certain governance tasks on behalf of members. While this might enable member engagement and improve decision-making along some margins, careful consideration has to be made of how the use of AI may compromise core cooperative principles, including autonomy and democratic member control. And there are good reasons for why cooperatives may be concerned about the use of AI systems, despite these benefits and particular use cases that I've flagged so far. So if we go look at the last slide for me, I can go into that a little bit. So the rapid proliferation and use of AI have raised concerns about the social, political, and environmental impact of this technology. And these very rightly have raised concerns within the cooperative movement about whether AI should be used in the first place, despite these benefits I've mentioned. And this is in large part because AI systems are deeply embedded in their physical environment. So if we think about generative AI in particular, running generative AI requires a lot of computing power and material infrastructure. So think of servers, data centers, and so on. This material infrastructure for computing itself is dependent on GPUs and microchips. Producing just a 2-gram memory microchip takes 1.3 kilograms of fossil fuels and minerals, with the sourcing often being opaque and much of the materials being discarded as waste. Copper comes from all over the world, from places like Peru, and gold from places like the Brazilian Amazon, lithium from Chile, and cobalt from the Congo. This rare earth mining leads to land grabs, indigenous dispossession, water scarcity, and even the use of child labor. AI prompting, when accounting for all of this material infrastructure, uses a large amount of energy and fossil fuels as well. And so, due to this energy intensiveness, the AI industry has led innovations in carbon credits, renewable energy production, nuclear fission, and so on, which in themselves have stirred controversies and clashes with local communities. So local communities have often started to challenge the diversion of water from them to cool data centers, even if those data centers might be using solar panels. So even the reconsideration of the type of energy being used might still cause a lot of undesirable outcomes. And so if we take the e-waste that is also generated by the development and maintenance of AI, so think of spent computer parts, burnt out processors, and so on, which are often dumped in poorer countries, we can really get an impression of the many types of environmental impact that AI use can have. Another reason why cooperatives might be concerned about AI use is the phenomena of monopolization and corporate consolidation. As startups typically do not have the computing power necessary to be able to be competitive in such an industry, the AI industry has often been dependent on or even led by existing big tech giants like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, and so on, because they have the servers, data centers, and other material infrastructure already. Moreover, the market for leading GPUs is extremely monopolistic. So NVIDIA being the prominent example, but even one layer beyond that, the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company that supplies NVIDIA, as well as AMD and so on, produces over 60% of the world's chips. If we go further up the stack, to be able to train ever better models that are increasingly general purpose, the data sets needed require ever more content. This further consolidates the power of a few large players and excludes many others. The other phenomena that we're starting to see, especially over the last year, is that AI companies like OpenAI and Palantir are often involved with various militaries. And in doing so, AI and AI companies often contribute to the perpetuation of crimes against humanity, the destruction of lives, livelihoods, property, and cultural heritage. And this often goes hand in hand with some of these same companies supporting and financing an authoritarian turn in national politics. So this not only takes the a form of campaign contributions, it also manifests in the type of technologies these companies choose to build, such as systems that enable systemic surveillance or facilitate mass deportation. And so in view of these concerns, cooperatives may be concerned about the economic and geopolitical dependencies created by the use of AI systems, as well as the constraints that the use of these systems intrinsically placed on transparent governance. I'm just wrapping up. But as well as how the rules that are being developed to regulate AI systems are evolving as well. And so cooperatives may be worried that the regulations that are being developed to tackle some of these externalities would create new compliance requirements that make it difficult for them to deploy AI. So what we will have to ultimately do if we want to use AI is balancing growth and operational efficiency with these non-negotiable cooperative principles, and this will require continuous dialogue and adaptation. So with that, I will hand over to Trebor to continue.
Fantastic. Thank you, Morshed. First of all, like, it's so great to see so many familiar faces, and also acknowledging just all of us, right? You could be spending time with your kids right now, go out for a walk, but no, we're all here, right? And I think what unites us is this sort of commitment to the cooperative principles, and so just acknowledging that before we even start. And yeah, so where does this start? And we get these emails every day, and with people telling us about their experiments. And so we've seen, like, in the last few months, so many cooperatives starting to experiment with with AI. Of course, like Morshed already pointed out, like large agricultural cooperatives use it to identify dry zones on their field, right? Like for weather forecasts. You have in education, cooperatives use designing chatbots to distribute educational material in different languages. So just imagine in Kenya, for example, you have like 60, 70 languages in one country. So imagine the power of a chatbot like this that could address those differences. We also see it with Security in Brazil, which has used OCR and AI to speed up loan applications for their credit union. And Security is just one example. Really, many credit unions have started doing that. And there are also, we were approached by a collective that started to design cooperative AI agents, and with a vision of a cooperative commons of AI agents where these cooperative agents service each other either for free or for very little money. All right, next slide, please. So what's really so promising, right? So in theory, like the cooperative principles can really change AI development completely, right? So you have this idea of democratic governance, which means that members could actually shape how AI systems are designed. You have participatory design, right? So like really jointly from day one, designing those systems from scratch. You have the idea of user control over data. So not only just asking what is done with the data, but if to collect them in the first place, and if they are collected, where to store them, and then if you want to sell them to whom, or doing none of that, right? So it's about accountability and digital independence, or what people refer to as digital sovereignty. And then you have data cooperatives, and we will talk about this quite a bit in the next few weeks. And third is this question of trust and transparency, and we will hear from Dorleta about this right after us. So talking about transparency and the desire of explainability of the tech that cooperatives are using to their members, right? And yeah, so you have, as a result, in theory, right, a greater acceptance of AI-related decisions. And we are so not really dealing anymore with these programmers that are beholden to shareholders or investors, but instead, designing black box systems which are unaccountable, with unaccountable algorithms, with bias, serving corporate interests, and often producing outcomes that are unpredictable and opaque. So with cooperatives, the value created with AI is meant to stay within local communities, and the gains are shared, and cooperative governance encourages that open discussion of these models and outcomes. And so we will hear again about this from Dorleta, who is one of our fellows this year. And from research on Emilia-Romagna, the cooperative area around Bologna in Italy, we see that automation doesn't automatically or doesn't inevitably have to lead to job losses. And so the same could apply also or be understood in relation to AI when we think about community-oriented innovation, right? So this is how this could be different. There would be no focus on short-term profits. Instead, you would have a long-term focus on sustainability, which is what co-ops are so good at. And there would be cooperation among cooperatives, the sixth principle. And you would have data that can be pooled, right, and shared with data protocols. And therefore, the knowledge that cooperatives accumulate could be to the benefit of the whole ecosystem. So all of that in theory. But the question remains, how does this actually play out in practice? Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, and there we see really different approaches, right? So we see on the one hand, cooperatives simply adopting, right? So applying big tech AI tools with little structural change in sectors like agriculture, insurance, finance, right? Just to stay competitive, to keep up, but thereby creating really long-term dependencies that are very, very hard to get out of once you go down that route. Second, you have a more critical approach, right? So where cooperatives are employing AI selectively on their own terms, emphasizing education and training. And I think Mondragon here is an example, and we will hear about that from Dorleta. And then we have a growing number of cooperatives who really build their own tools, right? So developing their own AI systems, including small custom language models to experiment with member participation. That's the case in Austria with these very large, wealthy cooperatives. And also creating tools in areas neglected by these dominant companies. And there you can think about the history of electric cooperatives, right? Where in the United States, where this was also the case. So there are also democratic applications where existing AI is used within the sort of participatory governance processes, again, to strengthen trust, explainability, and member benefit. And then lastly, and I think this is very important because there's this sort of elephant in the room where you might ask, well, who says that we should be using this at all, right? I think Morshed already pointed to this and said, like, well, it's kind of embedded in everything around you. So it's in the word processing programs that you use, in Photoshop and whatever kind of program you're turning to, AI is already there. And so it's hard to escape. But there are, of course, conscious decisions where cooperatives decide to refuse the use of AI. And I think a good example is Co-op Cycle in Europe, which has decided already many years ago to not have worker surveillance software used in their platform, right? Which, of course, all these gig economy platforms are very much using. So in theory, cooperatives could contribute significantly to AI, but then, of course, the saying goes like that the map is not really the territory. And I, of course, hear you say and think that, well, there's this massive infrastructure, right, that even the biggest co-ops could probably not keep up with, right? So you have the NVIDIA and you have all these like vast data centers, right? So I think you are right, right? So like an industrial-sized LLM is probably not possible even for the largest cooperatives, but there are these in-between spaces, right, where I think co-ops can very much intervene. But I think other than with platform co-ops, who in some cases were absolutely able to compete also with supply chains not completely being cooperative, right? I think with AI, this is much harder, right? So here you really have these infrastructures that make this very, very complicated. So I think to even have a chance in that space, cooperatives really need to collaborate with social movements, with government, with universities, and with other solidarity enterprises. And we see many examples of that already happening around the world. So this cannot happen in isolation. All right, so let me show you just a few examples through the next slide. So you will find that, could you go to the next slide, Fernanda? Thank you so much. No, the one before. The one before. Yeah, this one. So you will find that the pioneers, the new Roadster pioneers, tend to be librarians. So you see this with this co-op that was founded in 2019, started with a 10 million euro grant by the European Union. And it is a platform for handwritten and printed text recognition in historical documents. So they are scanning and basically making searchable handwritten documents. I don't know if any of you know Jeremy Bentham. Like, maybe raise your hand if you do. Do you know Jeremy Bentham? Yes, some hands go up. So the guy with the panopticon, right? So transcribers transcribed all of his handwritten notes. They just finished this, hundreds of thousands of them. In total, the co-op has processed some 90 million documents, right? So it's a cooperative which is truly a cooperative, right? Really committed, with a wonderful paper on this topic as well, documenting how they really think through and struggle to follow the cooperative principles and apply them to AI. So probably the strongest and very successful example. They have also an astonishing attendance rate at their general meetings, and I still have to dive into this to find out how they do this, but I think it's like 85% or so of members show up for meetings. Almost unheard of. Can you go to the next slide, Fernando? All right, great. So this is not Walmart or another corporate headquarters. This is also a cooperative. OCLC, WorldCat. So if you ever walked into a library, right, and you ask the librarian, you give me all the books on multi-stakeholder governance models for collectively owned AI infrastructure, of course, the librarian will roll their eyes. And then they will say, like, well, this would have to be an interlibrary loan, right? So this would come from another library. And so in this case, WorldCat will kick into effect. And so you probably all had contact with WorldCat at one point or another. It's a global cooperative bibliographic infrastructure with 16,000 libraries involved, 120 countries, shared standards and services. So really like a great example of what we are talking about here. WorldCat really shows like how federated institutions around the world can build a shared cooperative digital infrastructure. All right, the next slide, please. So I just threw up like a few numbers. So really to show their might, Federated Knowledge Commons, right? They invested $37 million last year alone to focus on developing AI for their cooperative. They invested $162 million since 2017 when they were founded. So, okay, and let's move on to the last example, which is just was announced, I think, last week, which is by Amul, which, of course, to this crowd here, I don't have to explain, right? The largest milk producer in the world. If you ever been to India, you definitely had an Amul ice cream or yogurt. And so they just launched a platform where called Salaben. It's an AI advisory system that runs on their Amul Pharma app. And the idea is basically in these 18,500 villages where they made this accessible, that the farmers could basically learn about animal nutrition, vaccinations, right, disease prevention, treatment, and this can all be done also via voice calls, right? So, and the aim is to improve decision-making and farmer income. All right, I think this is, I'm even a minute under time, so fantastic. I can just make a brief break here, give everybody a moment to breathe, I guess. These were like a few first examples of all of that. So, okay, can we go to the next slide? I think that starts with me as well. I think this is in a way repeating a little bit of what, or picking up on what Morshed had talked about. And so here, just this term of the extraction stack, as it is sometimes pointed, or some people call it the authoritarian stack now. So this is sort of what we are up against, right? So some of you may have heard about this. It refers to the like full chain of components that enable AI, right? So everything from the soil to the cloud, right? From the rare earth mineral to the cloud computing. And this is really like how we have to think about AI, I think, and and this is essentially what needs to be this is how we have to think if we want to think about alternatives, right? We can't really think about individual projects or just one cooperative or one platform, but it has to really be an ecosystem thinking, right? So, and yeah, I mean, I think Morshed talked about a lot of that already. Maybe I shouldn't even repeat that. Maybe Morshed, do you just want to jump in?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to. So in terms
So
of
great we
trying
do
to
this
think,
together.
yes, exactly. So I will say a little bit about the alternative and then hand over to Trebor again. So this idea that Trebor and I are floating right now is that we need a solidaristic, democratically governed counter infrastructure for the development of AI. And our focus in this regard shouldn't just be on a single company that develops an AI system. So take, for example, Alphabet and Google, because the social, political, and ecological effects of AI emanate from across the supply chain. So we believe that the focus should not just be on the individual company, but really should be on the entire stack, the tech stack. So this is why we are arguing for the building of solidarity stacks, where projects and initiatives are woven together into not just isolated, inspiring examples, but into a stack that really consolidates counterpower to the to resist corporate power of AI companies. So solidarity stacks, in our view, begin, as Trebor just mentioned, and in a way, as we all do, it begins from the soil. So if we think of the earth layer, we already find examples of cooperative mines like CMDS, which operates the Kamilombe mining site in Kolwezi in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this ethical cooperative mine has 6,000 members, organizes artisanal mining of rare earths, and it does so in a manner that not only improves working conditions, but also contributes to the local community in building hospitals and schools and so on. So the cooperative participates in ethical cobalt trade, and cobalt is an important mineral for AI as well. It does so through the Fair Cobalt Alliance, which connects the cooperative with downstream buyers of these minerals, and those downstream buyers help make the types of financial contributions that can help eventually build hospitals and so on. And so it really shows this type of stack-like thinking that we were referring to. Now, as mentioned also by Trebor right now, these minerals are essential for building computing hardware. Here too, we see examples of broadband network architecture that is cooperatively governed. So for instance, in Tameside in Greater Manchester in the UK, you have several municipalities that have invested and co-govern broadband networks together in this way. We've seen cooperatively governed data centers, some that have been around for a while, like the OCLC that Trebor mentioned. And all of these enable the sharing of costs and the benefits of compute with each other. And then if we take this one layer above, there are cooperatives that already govern and manage data. And some examples are well known to this group. So health data by My Data, knowledge being governed as a commons, like Trebor mentioned with the example of Read Co-op. And this type of collective governance of data is essential for the training and development of AI systems. As I mentioned, you need this data to be able to engage in machine learning. These examples show how the donation of data can be a form of cooperative patronage, and they show how cooperative members can be involved in democratic decision-making regarding data use, AI training, and surplus allocation. It shows a lot of what is already possible, at least through these individual inspiring examples. But at the level of the user, we can also see specific AI systems being developed, like small LLMs, that adhere to different values than the ones that we most commonly see, like ChatGPT. So these different values can be the preservation of indigenous or endangered languages. It can be, showing a particular consideration of knowledge that is under threat of being lost. The dilemma, though, that we who are interested in supporting this counter infrastructure face is threading together these inspiring different layers a nascent solidarity stack together. And I think I'll hand over to Trebor to continue because we have some ideas about this as well.
Yeah, and I think it's so great to be in this group here with people from the US, right, from Denmark, from France, from South Africa, Nigeria, Tobago, right, where else? Spain, Trinidad, right? Because you have such a rich history of cooperatives, and here the imagination really matters, right? To really like envision like a different system and how cooperatives could insert themselves. And and the question that would come up is, what would a democratic AI infrastructure look like? And so it wouldn't be organized about profit maximization, right? But around social and ecological goals. It would be rooted in local economies, like I said before, and it would be guided by cooperation and solidarity. So shared through democratic decision-making, right? Members would participate in governing it. Ownership would be distributed, and the benefits would be broadly distributed rather than captured by shareholders. And so, but if it would, it would prioritize community needs, as I mentioned before, right? Mutual aid would be based on cooperatives, but also mutuals and also, solidarity enterprises, and expand inclusive economic participation and promote fair and decent work. Because when the labor aspect is very important, because I think what is often, I think in scholarly circles, you all hear this every day, but maybe not everybody comes from this background here. So there's this huge discussion about the invisible labor that powers all of this AI system. And one of our fellows right now, for example, is from Nigeria, and she was a content moderator for Facebook and OpenAI, and the working conditions are, I would compare them to human trafficking, right? So people very similar to Foxconn in China in the early days, where people committed suicides, right? Really very dramatic. And so, there we are thinking just like, how can you fill in these pieces of the puzzle? And one would be like a cooperative for content moderators. So we started one with her, and are trying to make this work. It's very difficult because it also depends on legislation, right? It depends on funding, on clients, and of course, always the biggest problem is collective action, right? So you could think of borrowing from like Eric Olin Wright, right? This kind of like a real utopia, right? So not a fantasy, but an institution we built step by step inside the existing system. And like I said, to many of you, of course, that isn't foreign at all, because you come from, Canada, Saskatchewan, and many other areas, of course, famous Quebec, right, for its amazing cooperative history. And, you have long traditions of credit unions, agricultural co-ops, community-owned services. So this is basically just sort of extending the familiar to this cooperative logic to AI, and handing it back to Morshed.
Yes, so I think one element that will be, quite distinct about what we are thinking about with respect to this counter infrastructure is about the role of collective governance. Because in this particular group, we are very familiar with a lot of ideas with respect to what cooperative governance can look like. But as we are trying to propose a stack focused approach, this would require collective governance, not just at the level of individual projects or initiatives, but across layers of the solidarity stack. And this would also be important for ensuring the intertwining of these layers. So for instance, we can imagine, and we already see this, and this is what my example is based on, internet service cooperatives that not only provide services to other cooperatives or enter into partnerships with tech worker cooperatives, these internet service cooperatives could patronize and help govern software cooperatives. So those that you would need to publish your code in, like a git.coop. So we already see this starting to happen, where you have these tech worker cooperatives and software cooperatives already not only supporting each other by referring clients or projects to each other, but also in terms of being involved in each other's governance. We would like to encourage and see this more and happening in more and more cooperative ecosystems. We'd also like to see, for example, democratically constituted committees that could be formed to enable collective governance across the stack, with value distributions made from surplus generated at individual layers being then redistributed to the most vulnerable communities. So you can see the role of a particular committee that has representatives from different layers of the stack assisting in such allocations. This fair COBOL scheme that I mentioned a little while ago already gives a little bit of an idea of how such a governance system and distribution scheme could be set up. They have this type of credit scheme where those who are wealthier buyers of minerals downstream are able to allocate resources upstream so that those resources then can then be allocated based on a multi-stakeholder committee's decisions about what is most needed in a particular vulnerable community. So let's say a place where there's the risk of environmental pollution or where there's a risk of social harm arising from mining. And so there's an importance, I think, to thinking of how you can be wary and conscious of the impact that these activities can have, not just at the individual layer in which a particular technology is being developed or operated, but across the entire stack. And finally, I think the example that Trebor mentioned of the OCLC and the global governance architecture it has, where you have libraries being able to represent themselves at the highest level of governance of the OCLC nonprofit cooperative, through the fact that they can have representatives who are elected to, who are selected to the board of trustees of this particular entity, enables a global representation of these librarians that would otherwise not be possible, but also enables the legitimacy of this particular longstanding cooperative to continue over successive generations. I think it also helps ensure the adaptability of this particular entity to newer challenges, like being able to keep up with new trends and new developments in AI. And so I think in thinking of what different solidarity stacks could try to achieve by enabling collective governance, they can look at examples like OCLC and maybe not copy it, but try to use it as an inspiration for striking a balance between efficiency and legitimacy, especially the type of legitimacy lent by having global member participation. I think that's all I really have to say as well, Trebor.
Fantastic. Good. Okay, well then we go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, handing it over to Dorleta. So happy to be that you can be here, Dorleta. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Trebor, Morshed. I will try to add a couple of ideas to the discussion. For those less familiar, Mondragon is a network of cooperatives based in the Basque Country and brings together industrial companies, retail, finance, and a university, where myself, I'm a member and a worker. So when we talk about AI in organizations, we usually talk about technology, but in Mondragon, that's not the most interesting question. The real question is what AI is doing to work and to the people doing that work. Because in a cooperative, people are just not employees, as you may know. They are members, decision makers, and ultimately even responsible for what happens. So Mondragon is built on a very specific promise, like participation, shared ownership, and democratic governance. So decisions are not just operational. They are supposed to be understandable, discussable, and most importantly, collectively owned. And that is exactly where AI creates real tension. AI is been present across all the cooperatives in Mondragon for many, many years. More AI known as automation. But so, for example, in industrial environment, machines are equipped with sensors that continuously generate data. For example, data about temperature, vibration, or performance and all this data is collected from production lines. And that data is used to, detect defects or predict failures before they happen. But here is, I think here is a key detail. And the detail is that this is not always done inside the cooperative. And Trebor also mentioned this. So in many cases, that data is processed and sent to an external provider to build the models. So effectively, the cooperative generates the data, but the intelligence built on top of that data is developed elsewhere. And then those models come back embedded in systems that workers and managers are expected to use within the cooperatives' regular operations. And for me, this creates a structural contradiction. On one hand, Mondragon promotes transparency, participation, and shared responsibility. And on the other hand, it increasingly relies on AI systems that mostly are opaque, externally developed, and difficult to interrogate somehow, difficult to understand what they are actually doing, black boxes. So we have a model that assumes that people can understand and question decisions interacting with systems that are not designed to be questioned. And for me, this is important because this is not, on my understanding, this is not a failure of implementation. This is not that Mondragon is doing AI wrong. These systems are not designed to be transparent or to support collective decision-making. They are designed for efficiency, for performance, even for scalability, and often or usually in context where decision-making is centralized. So when these systems enter a cooperative, they do not just add certain capability to that cooperatives. They introduce a different logic of how decisions are made. And in my opinion, this is dangerous. Because it's a logic that is not neutral. So they shift decision-making away from deliberation towards recommendation, and over time from recommendation towards implicit automation. And no one questions anything. And this is not abstract. So this lands on very concrete situations. So a technician on the shop floor receives an alert. This machine is likely to fail. Or a manager sees a recommendation like adjust this process. Or someone in logistics gets a prediction about demand or delays. And in all these cases, the people, they face the same question that was also mentioned by Trebor earlier, that do I trust this? But that does not mean to trust a system that you did not, but I mean, how do you really trust a system that you did not design, you cannot inspect and you may not fully understand. So responsibility, yes, remains human, but control does not. And if we look at how these systems actually work, we are not dealing with isolated tools, but with chains. You can review the paper that is linked to this slide. So within these chains, data is generated in one place, is being processed in another, used to train models elsewhere, and finally embedded into systems used by someone on the ground. And along that chain, visibility decreases, understanding decreases, and responsibility becomes blurred. So the situation, we can say that is something like this. So we produce data. I mean, in Mondragon, we produce data. There are external actors that build models with that data, and then we as workers, we are expected to take responsibility for decisions, more and more often informed by those models. So I think that this is not a technical issue. This is a governance issue. And this is why I think another key question is, when does an AI system provide a defensible basis for action taken by people? So that we shouldn't be looking just for a useful output, not just a prediction that works most of the time, but something that some people can actually stand behind in front of their peers, in front of the cooperative itself, and in front of the consequences that action might have. So because in Mondragon, the decisions are not just executed, they are supposed to be justified. And justification requires more than accuracy. It requires understanding, the possibility to question, the ability to explain why a decision was made. And many current AI systems, they are not designed for that. So the challenge for Mondragon is not just adopting AI, that is a challenge by itself. It's facing a difficult question. So the question would be like, can you sustain a
It's
model
11 o'clock.
based on democratic decision making while you are relying on systems that are not democratically governed? Because if people remain responsible, but they are not meaningfully empowered to understand or even question AI, then something fundamental is lost. So if we take this seriously, the question is not just how to use AI responsibly. I think it is whether we are willing to redesign how these systems are integrated into the cooperative organizations. And that could mean things like not just accessing the outputs by themselves, isolated outputs, but having visibility into how those models are built. Not just using an external system, but deciding which parts should remain internal. So not just training people to use AI, and I think this is really important, but enabling them to question it meaningfully. And that is not just, in my opinion, a technical shift. It is an organizational choice. And possibly, I would say, even a political one. So the real opportunity is not just to use AI, but to rethink how AI can be made compatible with collective, human-centered governance. And I will finish because I think that otherwise we risk keeping the language of participation without actual capacity to participate. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. Well, I'm sure there will be lots of questions. So we have 20 minutes for that. So lots of opportunity to ask questions. So I think the easiest is probably if you raise your hand, a digital hand. There's a function here down in the... Okay, yeah, Jean-Louis, please. What a pleasure to have you here. What an honor.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Louis Bancel. I'm in France, in Paris. I've been involved for quite a long time in the cooperative movement. I'm still active in different fields and especially in commons. And so two things. Thank you, Dorleta, for what you said. I fully back you and agree with you. It's not to be against AI, but of course, the question is that my concern, how far can co-ops be themselves victims of the global AI system? First, because we want and we pretend, and sometimes we are very open, putting information that could be taken by all those huge AI. And whenever you try to use AI to ask questions about, for example, cooperative governance, it's pitiful. That means that it is a way indirectly, and it's not maybe intended, just to push on the classical way of doing things. And whatever we proposed in the global cooperative movement is not turned back to people. So I believe that's something that should push us, I mean, co-ops, to build up something, especially with the academics, because whatever they try to spend learning, teaching, what is the cooperative value is lost, not in translation, but in AI. That's the first thing. The second one is, of course, it would be great if ever we could have a cooperative stack for sure, but it's not the fact that it's not open to others, but we have to teach AI. For example, in COP de Commun, which is a structure working on commons, we are learning our own AI with our own documents so that we can work any better on that. But we decided not to use and not to feed those ChatGPT and other AI. So I believe we have to be careful not to be unintendedly victims of the systems. We have to use the technology, but not to use it, not to be used by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Louis. So there are questions from Robert and from Kai, and just to encourage also Sonia Novkovich, like if you want to jump in, or I don't know, Fernando or Morshed, so everybody should feel free. But yeah, Robert, take it away.
Thank you. The last time I saw you was the cooperative platform #2. So it's been a while. So thank you.
Nice to see you, Robert.
Yes. I'm just wondering, architecturally, there seems to be an assumption. You know, there's an assumption about the value of the centralized architecture, and lots of evidence that it doesn't perform, and particularly as you're moving to agents and decentralized agents, and that they have to be domain aware. And that means they have to be really close to the people who are using them and what's meaningful to them and their ontologies and knowledge bases. So I'm just wondering if is that part of the thinking, which of course is aligned with decentralized models and you know community sovereignty, individual sovereignty over data, and things like that. I'd like to see how much that kind of decentralized thinking is being embedded in what you're talking about in terms of the governance, in terms of the underlying architecture. For example, there's things about how communities can have their own data centers, effectively localized data centers, utilizing underutilized access to the grid and things like that. And could that movement become part of this if we decide to shift to a more decentralized approach to this, to AI that is closer to people? So that's my question.
It sounds a little bit like something that Morshed would be best suited to address. Is that right?
Maybe I can just say a few words, and I think there are other questions as well. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few ideas that come to mind just based on what Robert was saying. The first is that we already see in, again, places like Manchester, the use of old bathhouses that have been around for over a century and aren't being utilized to their full capacity to run these types of community data centers. So there is this type of an ambition. I think, of course, the challenge, on the one hand, it speaks very well to your decentralized governance point because it's an example of community governance. It has multiple uses of that data center for multiple purposes. So that also can help prevent centralized control. But at the same time, one of the issues that we see with this is, of course, whether it's able to keep up with the needs of, let's say, more and more cooperatives, community businesses, and so on, who have needs for more data centers. So there's always going to be a bit of a question of being able to keep up with demand. I think in terms of the decentralized architecture, at least the little bit that Trebor and I have been fleshing out with respect to the solidarity stack is really thinking of how you would have, for example, an interoperability between different data cooperatives, between data centers that are able to quite flexibly serve multiple service providers, let's call them, at different layers of the tech stack, without creating this sort of hierarchical centralization that we often see, where you would have just assets being owned by an entity that's higher up in the same value chain. And so we do see and envision this type of an approach, but of course there are not a huge number of examples for us to draw upon yet, and we are still, exploring ways in which this architecture could evolve. And I think your points were very valuable there in terms of thinking about, for example, how autonomous AI agents might be used for this purpose as well.
Then we have Kai and Malu. So I think Kai first.
Hi, thank you so much for all your talks. They've been super fascinating. I'm just wanting to actually
say who you are, maybe, Kai, like where you are.
Oh, of course, sorry. Yes, so I'm speaking in my own personal capacity as a video game developer, and setting up a cooperative network in the Atlantic Canadian region. But I also work for the International Center for Co-operative Management as a communications specialist. But all of these views are my own. And I'm aware that there are, in response to actually something that Jean-Louis said around what kind of ways can we almost stop ourselves from being victims of this larger system. So I'm just making 3 posts here in the chat that may be of interest to people if you haven't heard of these tools. 2 of them have come from the University of Chicago, and another is a personal project, not my own, but someone else's, that are providing defensive and offensive measures to the scraping of your data, basically. So Nightshade and Glaze, if you haven't heard of them, are very fascinating. They're tools that change the images that you may put up on the internet. So it might be a personal photograph, or their concept is very much based on the idea of artwork being stolen by these larger models and then repurposed to effectively make artists' jobs obsolete in the eyes, at least, of a CEO. And I think this is a very fascinating set of tools, because what we're seeing is like, we understand how these tools work for the most part in terms of how they get data, but we don't have a lot of ways to stop that from happening. So one way is to poison the data, to make an image that visibly to the eye looks completely normal, but the data itself, instead of a picture of the Mona Lisa, is a picture of a cat. So every time someone tries to make, using one of these diffusion model tools to create images, they'll, instead of getting their Mona Lisa, they'll get something completely different. And that is a defensive measure, because it means that these large companies that are trying to acquire this data for free without compensation are having to do more work in order to do it. It's more expensive for them to do it. Now, there's an argument there that you're getting them to waste more energy, but I think it's still an important thing to consider, how we respond to this. And one of the ways is to provide tools like this. The other one I'll mention briefly is Miasma, which allows you to effectively trap a scraping bot in an infinite loop on your website, so it can't kind of get out. It just gets fed this infinite stream of data, which isn't actually that computationally hard on your end to implement, but for the AI scraping bot or tool that is being used to collect your data, it traps them effectively and causes them to use more resources, and is effectively a dissuasive measure for any future scraping. So I just wanted to mention these and ask if there was any discussion about this in any of the speakers' circles around how to act defensively or offensively against this type of scraping.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure if somebody wants to respond to this, or if we maybe should take Malu's question as well.
Yeah, should I go?
Yeah, maybe, and then maybe we bundle it, and if somebody wanted to respond, they can still respond to the previous question as well.
Cool. So thanks very much, the 3 of you, for your presentations. And my question is more about the Mondragon case. And I was wondering how emblematic it is in terms of the impact of the adoption of AI by cooperatives in their internal governance and decision-making systems. And Dorleta did mention that there are ways in which perhaps the problems that she identified could be dealt with through perhaps training people how to be more critical with regards to AI, having more visibility on how systems are built. But I would like to hear from you, Dorleta, if possible, if considering the perhaps the fact that cooperatives are have a very different way of operating from a conventional enterprise, and that perhaps decision making is deliberately slower and involving different layers than a more centralized approach that we see in mainstream businesses. Do you think that using AI to speed up processes, to streamline activities, is still the best use of AI by cooperatives? And if not, if you still think there is a compelling case for using AI in cooperatives. So I'd just like to hear if you have any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Going a little bit more in detail about Mondragon Network. Mondragon Network nowadays are 90 cooperatives that they actually are independent. So they work in their own business areas. So some are industrial based cooperatives, other are working in finance sector, working in retail sector, but each of them, they are independent. So this is a kind of a distinction, I think, when we talk about governance and when we talk about the governance of the cooperatives and governance and Mondragon governance model. So there are like different layers. So and one of the main principles of Mondragon is keep jobs. Because, I mean, we are workers, we are owners, we are members, we make decisions, but if there is not a job for us, we wouldn't be members, workers, and decision makers. So the Mondragon experience, that now is called that way, is always trying to keep the competitiveness of the co-ops in their own sectors, making their business and value proposal competitive among the other competitors around the world. So I will say that introducing AI and the efficiencies that AI and automatization could give to that purpose, for Mondragon, I mean, always talking about Mondragon, it is important and it is necessary. Then, as I mentioned even before, AI is not new in Mondragon, but what is new is the scale and the type of use. So AI is already being used in predictive maintenance, anomaly detections, logistics optimization, even customer personalization. I mean, there are many use of AI or automatization that is being implemented in Mondragon already. And we are actually talking about hundreds of connected machines generated continuous data streams. And for me, this is the one of the important things, how we manage the data that then is going to build the model, but how we are going to manage the data. So when we are talking that there are more than, I don't know, 700 machines that are connected and sending data to a cloud that is being used for analysis, and then that analysis is being applied for optimizing the processes and adding value of the co-op within the market and within the market. So I think the most important thing that Mondragon Network could do is do not develop all this in isolation. So there is already a community in practice in Mondragon with more than 100 people across all these 90 cooperatives that work together in order to try to create a kind of a ecosystem of different uses of AI automation, and coordination is difficult, is really difficult. But again, all this is about how to make the processes, market-oriented processes, more efficient. Now there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make it possible to be governed in a participatory way.
Joris, you want to jump in quickly
Yes.
with a quick question? We have only a few, like 30 seconds.
I'll
40
try to
seconds
do it in less than a minute. I'm Yoros from Greece, University of Thessaly, and I'm very intrigued by what Dorleta is saying. We have been studying Mondragon from afar. I think that I'm a little perplexed about the where we start from. Because first of all, we should, I think, look at not only at AI as data and decision supporting, but AI as a capability that's transforming the content and the process of work. So in order to maintain workplaces and so on, jobs, perhaps we should see the transformative nature of AI, and at the same time to see how AI is not yet in a fixed paradigm. I understand that AI is in a pre-paradigmatic state still. And then we also have to work with our concepts a little more. In my opinion, it's not about data, it's about knowledge. And knowledge includes also judgment. And I think AI has still a lot of way to go that way. And then we have to see how our content of work and our management and the governance of the process and the governance of the technology, of shaping the technology, should take place. I would very much be interested to see how Mondragon and other big cooperatives would shape their own cooperative AI. But I have a difficulty to see this unless we are more definitive in our definitions, more precise in our definitions. I think that the definition of commons doesn't help us. In my opinion, cooperatives are clubs. They're knowledge clubs. And in that sense, with the economic definition of the term clubs, in that sense, their governance may be reshaped with or in tandem with the AI, but also we should see how we can shape a different trajectory for AI. What would we do differently in shaping AI in a commons or a cooperative perspective?
Exactly, and there are like
Thank you.
papers and practices and projects and experiments around the world, I think, that we are seeing emerging, asking exactly that question and building on that comment that Urius gave. Fernanda, could you jump to the next slide? We have only a few minutes left. So I think we can try this. So I don't know how you will respond to this, but we can try. I think, we've been together for like over an hour. And so the question, I guess, is like, well, what is there like a concrete takeaway for me or not, like apart from the points of discussion? And one thing I want to invite you to do is until April 20th, today is the 10th, so like for the next 10 days, to just sit down with one of your cooperators, a friend or a colleague, just, grab a glass of wine or coffee just for half an hour and think about, what your cooperative can do in this space. And maybe also what you would refuse, right? Not just to how to embrace it, but also what you would definitely not want to do. And and send us an email with what came out of this. So I think people sort of sitting together and starting to think about this, they don't have to know anything about it. It's just the intention to get your mind to think about this and to meet with others in your co-op to start this process would be great. Can you go to the next slide? And from there, we go to the next event that will happen on April 17th. And here we will discuss the commons, as we came up here many times, and open cooperativism. So I'm sure many of you have been came across that model. So we invite you to join that. This is led by Asta Kapoor, who's a well-known figure in participatory governance of data and from Bangalore. and by Vangelis from Greece, who has just published a book on open cooperativism, and with a discussant by one of our fellows from Nigeria, who is leading this discussion. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so here you see them briefly. Go to the next slide. Fantastic. So then on April 24th, we discussed more the material side of all of that. And I think this came up in discussions for Morshed and several times in the discussion, the necessity for physical infrastructure. So for example, the Basque Country is building its own data center to keep data local, right? We see cooperative data centers in Berlin, in the Netherlands, and in other places emerging. And so here's a researcher, Tara Merck, who has focused on that and researches cooperative data centers. And then Kenzo Zoares comes more, is also another of our fellows who focuses more on the policy angle. And he is Brazilian and contributes he worked on Lula's team and brings the sort of policy insight. And Fakim is a student at Cambridge who studies crypto cooperatives. So this will be a super interesting discussion to which we invite you. We will send you these slides so you can also as a PDF, so you can click on these links. Could you go to the next slide, Fernanda, please? It's 2 minutes left. Yeah, so you can go next. Exactly. So the last thing I want to say is that all of these events culminate in November with the conference in Bangkok. So the PCC does one conference a year. Last year we were in Istanbul, before that in Mombasa in Kenya, and in many other places like Rio de Janeiro and Hong Kong. And so this time in Bangkok, and really linking it to the cooperative movement in Thailand. And thinking about, this question, right, the solidarity AI and all these things that we discussed today. And once you get this PDF, you will also have all these links to this paper that Dorleta referred to on Mondragon and AI, and also some others, also from the majority world here by Anita Gurumurthy, talking about regenerative AI. Good. So this, with 1 minute left, maybe we are cycling back. I don't know if Sonia wants to have a closing remark.
No, just to say, here you have more information about the organizing organizations or institutions. And thank you to the speakers. Thanks, Morshed and Dorleta and Trebor. This was a learning moment for me because I don't live in these spaces. So it was really important to hear how you're thinking. And I'm sure Dorleta will be talking to you more because these questions are absolutely relevant, especially for worker co-ops, I'm thinking. And it reminds me of democracy itself, like political democracy, where you are supposed to know what you're voting for, and you can question that these days. I think that's where the heart of the problem really is. So thank you so much for making us think, and I'm looking forward to the next event in a week.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. We started on time, we're ending on time. So thank you all for coming, and see you on the 17th.